The director here. Today, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this seminar. This is part of our Europe series. As some of you know, this is a Europe seminar series sponsored by the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And this seminar is, in addition, is co-organized together with the EU delegation in Oslo. So very happy for that. Let me also mention that, as you know, that we at NUPI have a research project sponsored by the Norwegian Research Council on Europe in transition, looking at the changing role of the EU in the global affairs and how small states like Norway address to that changing global landscape and European landscape. The topic today is peace and stability, and of course this is a very important topic. We see that the neighborhood of Europe is under significant pressure. The east, we have the developments in Ukraine. In the south, we have the developments in Northern Africa or failed states. In the southeast, we have Syria and the Middle East in deep transition. I just read that paper on Journal Economics and Peace, just published, I think, today, showed that last year 18,000 people were killed in terrorist actions. That's up 62% from last year. Quite significant. So we are not living in a harmonious, peaceful world. It's quite a lot of war, uncertainty, rebel, etc. So peace is, of course, extremely important. And as some of you might recall, a few years ago, the EU was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Not so much for its contribution to global peace, perhaps, but primarily to peace among member states and in the enlargement efforts, stability in the continent. But what role do the EU really play in making peace in its neighborhood and in the world in general? This is an aspect that is a bit more poorly understood and also more poorly researched. Some weeks ago, we invited Stephen Blockmans to come here, and he discussed these topics, and he promised to be following the seminar today because he wanted to see the conclusion to his paper somehow today. He argued that the legal developments in the EU have been significant in the sense that there's a legal obligation to peacemaking in the Article 43 in the EU treaties. And he underlined the moral duty to secure peace enshrined in the Charter of the Treaty and the constitutional documents, etc. So on the one hand, he said that some of the legal elements and the moral foundation for peacemaking is now in place. He questioned somehow the ability to contribute to peace. He said that now the ambitions have been rising, expectations are rising, but there's some questions whether EU would be able to meet those expectations and to deliver on them. In order to achieve results, the EU need to use and build its knowledge, expertise and networks, and these capabilities had then to be matched with economic, organizational and political resources, he said. So, to be short, he said that one of the key challenges is now for the EEAS, the External Action Service, to marry the expertise, the EU budget, and the cloth of the common foreign and security policy. And today, we are fortunate to have the expert to show us whether that will happen. Malgorzata Wasilewska, she's Polish. She's currently head of division for conflict prevention, peace building, and mediation instruments at the epicenter of this, the European External Action Service. In this capacity, she works in areas of conflict prevention, mediation support, and development of the early warning system for conflict in the EU. She has been involved in supporting EU delegations in numerous countries. She has a long and distinguished career in election and democracy support in the EU, and she has managed electoral observation missions to more than 20 countries. And before joining the EU, she worked as a senior specialist on issues of organizational governance and strategic planning at Amnesty International and Safer World. It's a pleasure to welcome you here. She will talk for, I don't know, you can continue as long as you want almost, but we should end in 55 minutes or something, and we should have allows for some time for Q&A. So on that note, welcome to NUPI. It's a pleasure to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and it really is a pleasure and an honor. And thank you to the organizers for the opportunity to engage with all of you, with colleagues and peers in Norway, where obviously I think everybody understands this very well. There is enormous amount of knowledge and expertise and experience in conflict prevention, peace building, and mediation work. So it's a particular pleasure, and I'm pretty sure that amongst you, there are experts who know much more than I do and who have been involved in this field for much longer than I have, or even much longer than my division has existed inside the External Action Service itself. So I will try to give a little bit of an introduction of how we positioned, how we work inside the EU, how we work with others, and what we aim to achieve. And then I hope that during the exchange I'll be very happy to explain this a little bit in more detail if you wish so. So the division itself is younger than the External Action Service. It's only there for 3 years, and we've been tasked with a whole range of things to develop tools, methodologies, to build expertise on mediation support, conflict prevention, and to develop capacities to provide operational support to the work of our geographical colleagues inside headquarters, but also to our delegations. But I stress this because we have a supporting role. So without the request or the approval of our geographical colleagues or delegations, we cannot activate any of the tools, and they very much lead the work that we do. But maybe just taking one step back and referring a little bit to the discussions you had here 2 weeks ago, why EU? Why is EU best placed to be involved in this work? So apart from, of course, the fact that these are values to us which are enshrined in the treaties, and EU is absolutely committed in all its work to try and to strive to prevent conflicts and preserve peace around the world. We are also very unique in a sense that we are a regional organization, but with global presence. So there isn't another intergovernmental body like that, and that has its opportunities, but also its obligations. We are present in almost all countries of the world. We are the long term, so we engage with long-term projects. So apart from the fact that we can deploy expertise on certain areas for a short period of time, our bilateral assistance, our cooperation, our development cooperation allow us to have long-term support to different processes. But EU is a peace project in itself, and as such is perceived by many people as an excellent model and example of peaceful transition. So there are many places in the world where EU is specifically asked to come and play a role in coming out of post-conflict situations and bring models and bring examples of how this peaceful transition took place in our countries. So, of course, countries like Norway and Switzerland also are quite rightly perceived and get a lot of credit for their neutral position, for the expertise, for many years of experience. But it is also important to understand that EU is seen as a neutral actor with very good experience and very good understanding of how peaceful transitions can work. Having said that, maybe I'll move directly to the specific tools that we've been asked to develop. So first of all, we have a mediation support team. And that's a result of a 2009 mediation concept. And it's important maybe to understand that in EU's interpretation, mediation is seen quite broadly. So it isn't just track one process at the high political level. between the conflict parties, but it's almost everything that goes around that. So it's our political dialogues, it's our political work led by delegations, but it's also support at the very local level and the dialogues that we can facilitate between different communities, as well as engaging the academics and the community leaders and making sure that they play a positive role in the peace process. So as such, we set out to have a complementary role. EU almost never gets a global mandate for track 1 mediation. In most cases, it's UN. So we set out to complement the work that UN is doing and set our work in such a way that it helps, enhances, and long-term supports the mediation processes that are led by UN. But we also support the role of regional organizations. Not only in building their capacity for mediation, conflict prevention, even for early warning systems, but we support the role that they can and should play in mediating and peace-building processes. So this goes very well with the fact that we've got quite a lot of money for also for supporting regional organizations. And in that, we try to develop our tools that we support and we build capacity, we share experiences and tools, but we don't necessarily assume to always play a key role. So the mediation support team was established based on the experience and lessons learned from UN. UN, of course, is a mediation support unit and a standby team, which exists very well and functions very well thanks to the generosity of the Norwegian government amongst other donors. But it is Norway, I think, who was absolutely instrumental in setting this very successful model of quickly deployable experts with fantastic experience who can go and very quickly support mediation processes. So our mediation support team was based on a similar model. We have 5 experts inside our division. They come from different walks of life. They've got prior experience in UN or in the field working directly on peace processes in various countries. Some have been seconded by our member states, and they constitute a hub of knowledge, of expertise, of tools how we learn ourselves from the experiences that EU or others have in supporting peace processes. But they also we can also deploy external experts in order to support our delegations in the field. So we can train them, we can offer coaching, we can help them in brainstorm on what kind of a role our field presence should play in sort of broader peace process or in supporting design of national dialogue. The range of topics and the range of requests and the range of questions is extremely broad, and on a daily basis we get emails or phone calls from different colleagues, either in headquarters or in the field, give us examples of what EU can do in such and such a situation, or examples where EU was positively engaged and supported, for example, interfaith dialogue, or how can we work more effectively on counter-radicalization. That's one of the topics that is of great interest to many people today. And in order to provide that support, we've got an administrative budget of $500,000 a year, which is designed to provide operational support to our EU colleagues, so either to delegations or our geographical colleagues. And that allows us very quickly to either deploy people or organize brainstorming sessions, or go together with an external expert, for example, on constitutional processes, quickly to delegation, have a meeting, and help them think how quickly they can react to a particular situation. So that's the mediation support team. We've also got a website on which we try to have, we have fact sheets that show, again, the role of EU and how we can support different things, including mediation and prevention of electoral violence, for example. So that's the one cluster, the mediation support team. And that team works very closely with our UN colleague from the mediation support unit. So before we do anything else, when we get a request, the first thing is that we check what UN is doing and whether our work would complement their work and their efforts at the track 1 level, or whether there is a different angle that would help to enhance what they're doing. We also have a extremely collaborative and successful cooperation with civil society. There is something called the European Peace Liaison Office in Brussels, and it's a secretariat for a very extensive network of civil society organizations working on peace building and mediation and conflict prevention. And that allows us, again, to tap very quickly into the expertise that exists in think tanks and civil society organizations, either internationally or at the local level. And through EPLO, we have a parallel track very often. So when we are busy trying to help our delegation design certain responses based on the knowledge of experts, we can also organize a very quick meeting with civil society organizations, both international and national, or just national, in order to verify whether the thinking of the experts and the support we're providing for the delegation is confirmed by the thinking of civil society organizations. And we feel that's a very important part of our work. That allows input also, or that facilitates sometimes inputs of civil society organizations into more formal structures. The second area of our work is conflict prevention. And there we've got actually 2 full-time experts and 2 part-time experts that are working on other issues as well, who are basically conflict advisors. And we've developed a light touch methodology for conflict analysis in order to be able to have facilitated discussions on mapping out the actors in conflict, looking at the dynamics of conflict, trying to understand who are the different actors, where in all of that is EU and what EU does or doesn't have influence on, and whether we can influence dynamics of conflict, and what therefore should be the short-term or long-term scenarios for EU's responses. Now, it seems like quite an obvious exercise, and seems like this is something that is or should be part of everyday political work of any diplomat or any member of public administration. But unfortunately, it's not, and partly that's because people are so busy doing their daily work, and even those who are engaged on daily basis in work on a given country very rarely have a chance to stop and reflect whether their analysis is shared by the other colleagues who are working on the same country. So when we bring together people who work on the trade side, on the humanitarian assistance side, our colleagues from who manage the civil and military missions, our intelligence colleagues, our delegation colleagues, our human rights colleagues, and we have those conversations, it turns out that very often those interpretations are not necessarily exactly on the same page. It is very important that, of course, it goes without saying, that whatever development assistance we have in the country doesn't negatively influence the dynamics of already existing conflict or of dynamics in a country where there is a risk of escalation into violence. And so we're trying to make sure that that tool is used systematically, and that eventually colleagues will be able to do this basically as part of their daily work. And we facilitate these discussions again upon request, and we do them either in headquarters, when we can bring more people from different directorates in Brussels, and very often as a two-step process. We also facilitate those discussions in country, and we always invite 2 or 3 external experts with really substantial knowledge of the country. And that is, again, quite innovative for the administration to have external experts in very internal and sometimes sensitive discussions. But it's very important in order to have people to challenge our thinking and to make sure that we're not just busy ticking boxes and going through what are the sort of responses that we use to providing in those kind of situations. These are very successful, and in some cases we've repeated them 2 or 3 times, looking at a more sort of in-depth aspect of conflict dynamics in a particular country. An additional tool that we have is a literature review. We can commission very quickly a review of recent literature on conflict, whether anybody else has done conflict analysis in a country, and that provides a very useful background paper for either conflict analysis or any other brainstorming sessions that we can do. We also do work on security sector reform, where we're trying to provide better support to our delegations on basically how they can work more effectively on security sector reform. But there I don't claim that we have any exclusive role inside the EU. We are just one of many directorates that covers this field, but we are a little bit of a hub because of the whole conflict prevention angle, so therefore it's an important area of our work. We also contribute to policy developments. Probably the best example at the moment is the transitional justice policy, a new policy that has been tasked under the Human Rights Action Plan. The job of my division is to make sure that there is a conflict prevention lens adequately reflected in that transitional justice policy paper. And the big challenge will be how we'll be able to support the implementation of that policy once it's adopted. At the moment, the plan is that it will be adopted in the first quarter of the year if everything goes well. Now, the last but not least area of work is an early warning system. This is again a tasking from the Council, which came in 2011 and asked External Action Service to develop a new tool for early warning system for conflict. Now, the most important thing that I need to stress that this is not a system that aims to predict when a conflict will erupt. It's a system for better management of risks of conflict. So what it aims to do is to bring on the agenda and into our radar those countries where if we're not careful, if we're not really following the dynamics and developments carefully, if we don't rethink what we're doing in those countries and how we're helping them, there is a risk of escalation into violence in a period of 1 to 4 years, looking ahead. And that's a realization that on daily basis, and particularly in today's environment, there are so many conflicts around us. I think it's no secret I mean, if we think where we were this time last year, I think we were still talking more about democratization and transformation processes and human rights, whereas today there are so many conflicts around us, so many challenges, so many hard security, difficult questions that in the Political and Security Committee, the majority of discussions focus around those conflicts that are already there, but there is very often not enough time to discuss those countries where we can make a difference if we have conversations about what is going on there and whether we can address the deteriorating situation effectively to have better preventive impact. Now, the system that we've designed has been very widely consulted with many experts, with member states, with existing early warning systems or other tools for analysis of security challenges that exist inside EU system, either in headquarters, as I said, or amongst member states. And we've come up with something that we tested last year in Sahel and in Central Asia, deliberately in 2 regions that have completely different dynamics to see exactly how this would work. And since then, it's been further refined with the help of the Joint Research Center. And we now have a system which I will try to explain in a very simple way. But basically, it does a scan of global risks of conflict in line with a long list of criteria where basically there are 10 broad categories looking at areas such as legitimacy, rule of law, security, fundamental rights, civil society and media, intergroup relations, economic performance, disaster, environmental resilience, social welfare and equality, and regional stability. And these are just broad categories. There are more in-depth questions under each of those. Basically, it looks at history of violence, interethnic dynamics, and so on and so forth. So this first scan gives us a group of countries where, according to the open source data, because the first scan is done based on open source reports, indexes that are available out there, where it seems that the dynamics are deteriorating and where there is a worry that the situation may deteriorate in a period of the next 4 years. From that group of countries, we then have a discussion with our management inside External Action Service to ask whether the hierarchy feels that we're doing enough to address those potential problems in those countries, or whether with the help of the tools that we have, the expertise that we can provide, more in-depth analysis, there would be added value in generating more or different options to address those dynamics in order to prevent the deterioration. We are now in the process of global rollout of the system. As I said, it is quite complex, but what it aims to do is to have lots of discussions on whether we all have the same interpretation and whether we're all doing enough to address the dynamics of that can lead to violence. So once this global scan is done and the smaller list of countries is agreed upon, there is a discussion with our member states, and then there is a more in-depth analysis conducted in the field by our delegations in conjunction with our member states. And that's very, very important, because right from the beginning of that in-depth analysis, we are trying to create shared ownership, whether we have the same interpretation of what's going on in the country, whether we have the same assessment, whether the situation is stable or whether it's improving or whether it's likely to deteriorate, and most importantly, what are we going to do to address that? And those conversations are then continued back in headquarters and eventually again with member states. And here we hope very much that it's going to lead to a dialogue that will help all of us collectively as EU to generate better responses to the potentially deteriorating dynamics. It very often, that's the most challenging part. I think the analysis, the assessment, the signaling of risks is done quite well by many systems, but the link of the early warning to early action is the most difficult part. And again, during the pilot projects, we have actually asked for external expertise, again, during one of the consultation processes, for some of the external experts to help us and force us to think out of the box, because sometimes it's very difficult to think, what can we do differently? What other projects we can support in order to help, or, for example, to change the community dynamics that are deteriorating. You know, for example, there's a rising unemployment amongst youth, there are ethnic tensions. What is it that we can do to address that, or at least to diffuse that in a short and long-term scale? So the early warning system has a lot of there's a lot of excitement about this inside EU, and because it's been developed collectively with other directorates, we very much hope this is going to bring more collective thinking on the risks of violent conflict. And we think it's also going to change a little bit how we prioritize the countries that we provide mediation support, dialogue support, where we focus our expertise and so on and so forth. And of course, the long-term hope is that it will help us to become more effective in prevention of violence. So I think that's enough as far as the tools are concerned. Two more things. We work extremely closely with our Commission colleagues. We've got counterparts in DEFCO. We've got other counterparts in the Commission. We've got excellent collaboration both at the working level as well as hierarchical level. The early warning system is actually taken forward jointly by External Action Service and the Commission. And I think in our eyes, it's an excellent example of comprehensive approach in practice, simply because it tries to generate that ownership of the analysis from the very beginning through the consultation processes up to the point when we are trying to have a conversation with member states, whether all of us are fine-tuning or maybe realigning our development assistance, our projects in the field in order to have better impact on the dynamics. We work, as I already said, we work extremely closely with civil society organizations. The hubs are in Brussels, but they bring to Brussels or in the field, they organize lots of meetings with national as well as international experts. We work very well with member states, and there are many champions amongst member states who not only support our work, but also are generous enough to give us seconded experts where the capacity of the team is inadequate. And I have to say, with the increasing demand for the support that we offer, this is a challenge that we will continue having. And we work very well with regional organizations and particularly with UN, because we set out to have complementarity and a supporting role to the work that they do. So I'm not sure whether that covers a lot. The broad expectations of the topics that I was supposed to cover. Is there anything else that I've missed out?
No, I suggest that we just give you an applause for for this presentation. And then I can stand here, and then you can stand there, and then we open up for a general discussion. I think that if Stephen Blockman was right, they're saying the expectations are increasing, and when you roll out your early warning system somehow, that might add to this expectations that might rise. So, but thank you so much for this introduction. I suggested we just leave the floor open for discussion. So, and Liv has a microphone here. And first over here.
Thank you. My name is Kari Osland, NUPI. As for mediation, you said that the EU is seen as a neutral actor. I would claim that there is a contradiction between being an exporter of a normative ideology and being a peacemaker. And I'm wondering if you can comment on that. Thank you.
I didn't say it's necessarily perceived that way in every place of the world, but I said that many actors see EU as a neutral actor. Depends on the dynamics, depends on what other international actors play a role. Of course, we have many interests in many of those countries. We have trade relations, we have cooperation in many other fields. But at the same time, I think it was actually International IDEA who conducted a big consultation process with NGOs, with sort of during big regional gatherings of NGOs. How EU can most effectively support democratization. And time and time and again, the response from local organizations was, stop telling us what to do, show us how you've done that. And I think that confirms that EU is seen as an example of, in reality, peaceful transformation. So I agree with you that in some cases neutrality isn't easy, but nevertheless EU has a role to play in peace processes, as I said, by having long-term presence, long-term development cooperation, and inevitably that, and of course political work and political dialogues, and inevitably that has influence on the peace processes that are taking place. But because we set out to have a complementary role, we do not claim that we should play that upfront role in every peace process.
It's a very interesting topic because some of the business model I think for Norwegian peacemaking is basically saying since we are small, since we are not present everywhere, we don't have any interest, then it's possible to do the peacemaking. But you turn it the other way around and say since we are everywhere, we are having it, we can do it. So I guess you responded very convincingly. So I think there are different ways to
But
this.
if I can just add to that, we also have different levels of engagement in a
Sure.
country. We have, in some places, we have EU special representatives, we've got delegation, we've got community level projects, that allows us for different entry points. But it is very important that all our work and all our engagements are conflict sensitive.
Okay, so then it's over here.
Well, thank you. I'm Torgeir Fjertoft. I'm here in a dual role, both as a seasoned EU diplomat from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here, and also as a researcher with the Center for Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Oslo. I have a question. You gave a very interesting expose of the organizational setup and the interagency processes with which I'm very familiar and which I'm a big admirer. I wish we could work the same way here, which we don't, but that's a different discussion. I wonder if I could ask you to address some other issues that you did not discuss, and I think that's because it's probably difficult for you. I know that your role is to be a support staff for the Council, and the Council, of course, being the member states. And in my view, many of the current problems are, at least to some extent, due to policy mistakes by Western states, including member states of the EU. Libya is probably the most recent example. And I hope that, for example, the further policy in Afghanistan will not be a new one, or for that matter, Iran or whatever. I wonder if you could share with us some of those policy discussions among the member states when they sort of try to assess the consequences of past policy decisions, and perhaps also if there has been some kind of learning process, and if this learning process to the degree that it has been a learning process is considered useful for this process of prediction and prevention that you discussed, which is obviously the only important task. I mean, the only thing we can do about the past is to prevent it from destroying the future. So to me, that's the only important thing we all do. So I wonder if there's any effort to learn from past policy mistakes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm quite flattered that you think that I have a role that would allow me to comment on the policy debates between member states. I'm only a head of division of a big machinery. I'm not privy to foreign affairs councils and the discussions between ministers. And as I stressed at the beginning, we have a supporting role to the work that is led in each case by our geographical colleagues or by our delegation. So I really couldn't comment on the question concerning the discussions between member states. What I can say is that, for example, through the way we designed the early warning system, we are trying to facilitate those discussions precisely to avoid that there is a difference of interpretation of what we can do in the country way before it escalates to to the point that we have to the problems that we have today in Libya or Syria. And maybe those conversations should have been taking place a long time ago. I'm not saying that this is going to be a solution, but that we hope that will help. So these exchanges will happen now in the field. Then they continue in headquarters, and then there is an exchange with member states, first at the Political and Security Committee, and then it can go into more in-depth discussion in the Council working groups. So hopefully that will be a mechanism to at least understand better the differences, and providing the member states are willing to share what they doing that. But I have to say also that since the establishment of the in the post-Lisbon setup, I sort of entered the external action as head of division for elections and democracy support, and I saw a big shift. It really is much more now that member states and the institutions are on the same side. It used to be very much us and them, and member states were telling the Commission, what member states wanted the institutions to do. It's now really a joint thinking. What is it that we can collectively do, because we have a collective responsibility and we have to collectively come up with better responses. But as I said, I only see this as at a small working level, so I can only hope it continues.
Excellent. There's a few other hands, but let me take one question as well.
Yeah.
I think returning to the early warning system, I think it's extremely fascinating what you're doing. But it is a very ambitious project.
Yeah.
And it rests upon some very critical assumptions, and I'm glad to hear that you have consulted so many and that this is a deep-rooted kind of broad process. But first, there's a theory of conflict escalation that you have to have. So you said you had 10 parameters, but there's a kind of, how do you know how a small conflict might erupt into a bigger conflict? So there's a theory related to this. And then there's somehow a theory also of the shifting attentions in the EU. As you said, I think you rightfully said that we tend to be too occupied about the conflicts that we have present, and we don't see the ones kind of about to erupt. So we have to use a system also to change the attention. And then thirdly, it is a theory also of how to de-escalate conflicts, kind of how to match different initiatives with some kind of results. So, and I think all these things are related to the early warning system, and it's really amazing. Somehow, very high ambitions to try to do this. But I just wonder if you could say something more about of those 10 parameters. Which are the most important ones? Some people, probably Marianne or some others, kind of working on the Norwegian kind of piece, they would say, okay, human rights issues. If you see early signs of deterioration in human rights things, we know that something bad is going on. Among some of the peace workers, they would say that's a critical kind of, like a Richter-scala kind of measuring, kind of seismic measuring of potential eruptions. So what is the most important one? You mentioned a set of them. So that's what's your theory of conflict escalation, and what's your theory of conflict de-escalation? It's a very big topic.
Very easy topics. I don't think I could say that there is one area that is more important. And what is important is the conversations we have with those who lead the work in the field on the warring dynamics in any particular area. So, for example, if you look at civil society and media, as I said, these were 10 categories. There are more in-depth questions that allow then for the delegations and the member states to highlight those areas where they think there is a reason for concern, and also to tell us whether they agree on the interpretation or not. So that sort of relates a little bit to your question on lessons learned. I think we will be able to identify the difference of opinions and the difference of interpretation much better. And if so, why do they exist? And should there be additional discussions in the council working groups to address that? But if for example, civil society doesn't operate effectively, why and what are the reasons? And are we addressing this in our projects or not? And if not, why aren't we addressing? The conversations that will be happening in the field, is this a new phenomenon? Is this something that's been ongoing for a while and we have tried but we actually are unable to address it? Or is it really deteriorating dramatically and therefore we should do something differently? So I'm not claiming that this is going to be a golden tool that will allow us to press the magic button and divert the situation immediately. But at least it focuses the sort of prevention of violence thinking. And I also have to say, better conversations between our political sections and our operational sections inside our own delegation as well, delegations as well as with member states. And if then that is verified with external expertise and the assessments by think tanks and human rights organizations in this case, and they share the assessment, then why is it that we're not addressing that better? That's what we're aiming to do. I don't think we're trying to say that any of those categories are more important, or that if we address rule of law, therefore social welfare and equality will improve. And in some of those cases, maybe we cannot change those dynamics very well. They've been going on, they've been pretty poor for quite a long period of time, and maybe we are not the actors who can change that. But the most difficult thing, and this is work in progress, as I said, we are, and I just come from a day and a half exchange with our UN colleagues and with the Norwegian experts on the effectiveness of the UN standby team. And there were a number of mediation experts there who said they were part of conversations on early warning systems 20 years ago. And until today, there isn't one that is fully effective. And still the biggest challenge is how to move from early warning to early action. I'm not quite sure whether we will succeed, but our challenge is that because you have one set of thinking and one set of analysis and one set of program designs led by the institutions and then 28 member states. And unless we bring all of this closer together, unless we learn from each other, unless we have those conversations, there is a risk that we could end up pulling in different directions or having completely different approaches. So I don't think I can say any of those areas are more important than others. It may be that as we roll this out, as we learn from this, we will fine-tune this and have more focus on other areas. Regional stability, that is such an important area. I mean, today when we look at some of the most difficult conflicts, regional dynamics are extremely important. Have we done enough thinking about this before? Are we doing this only now? I don't know. I think the system will evolve.
Excellent. Very good. Okay.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. When you said that the link, of course, between early warning and early action is one of the most challenging things. This is quite, this is something that we can all understand, and it's often linked to the fact that member states cannot agree on the action. But in the cases where the member states actually agree, I guess you also meet some challenges when it comes to the implementation phase. And I would like you to say a little bit of where are the main obstacles? What are the main problems? Is lack of resources at the delegations, or or is it perhaps that the EU has been criticized for having a top-down approach for many years to these issues? And to what extent managed the EU to be conflict sensitive in the different conflict areas?
That requires a diplomatic answer that will not make me sound like I'm criticizing my colleagues who work on different areas. I think the fact that we've been tasked with developing these tools is a sign of reflection that perhaps we can be more conflict sensitive in our sort of development assistance. And we're definitely trying to learn from those member states or those organizations who have good methodologies on this. In terms of activities and what is difficult to implement, I think it's too early to say at this stage, because during the pilot phase, what we focused on is first we look at what we're doing in those countries and whether the projects that we have and the cooperation that we have is addressing the areas that we find that we think are of biggest concern, or whether anything needs to be realigned. Now, maybe the best answer is to say that how do we connect all the dots in order to be more effective in addressing those dynamics? Because our programming is long term. We can't always easily shift programs from one area to another, but it doesn't necessarily require that. It maybe needs to be maybe a part of the process. For example, if you support, I don't know, building a school for a local community, will that school, will the fact that it will be positioned in the middle between two communities make it conflict sensitive by definition? Or should there be a consultation process with both communities? Should there be people from both communities involved in building of that school in order to make sure that the families from both sides will actually send their children there? Or, those kind of things. So I think we need to see as we develop these, as we have these conversations, whether we can be more effective or not. I think at the moment, there are also probably challenges that sometimes political dialogue is here, and the projects that development assistant is here. The analysis is done by political colleagues, but the projects are designed elsewhere, and there has to be a better synergy. Maybe. I'm not, again, I don't want to make a sweeping statement or criticize any of my colleagues. I think there's a lot of thinking in different parts, and we just need to bring it closer together and have better methodologies across our different houses, and those important conversations with member states and with the outside experts.
Okay, thank you so much. And then front here. Since we're running out of time, I suggested we collect and then...
Thank you. Trine Eklund is my name. I wonder where you are or where you stay in the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Because the EU member states, they haven't been very much active in these 65 years, but maybe it's better now. Could you say something about it? Thank you.
And then Matea in the back there.
Thank you, Matea Peter from NUPI. I was wondering if you could tell us what the lessons learned are from the two examples that you did, Sahel and Central Asia, and sort of if you saw any clear policy developments based on the analysis. Are we seeing results from what you're doing?
Okay, I can't answer your question on Israel and Palestine. I'm relieved to say, because as I said, and maybe my colleague from the delegation feels more comfortable to address that, but it's we have a supporting role, and we haven't been asked to do any work on that particular conflict, either by delegation or by geographical colleagues. And again, it is not my role to speak about the policy for any geographical work that we do. I can only talk about the security policy directorate that I'm part of and how we design the work that we do. So it's a particularly challenging area of work. And I heard that there was something in the media suggesting that Norway can maybe play a role. So maybe that's something that EU would be very happy to support. On the Sahel and Central Asia, the work that we did fed into development of the new strategy for Sahel, and it also triggered a number of requests for additional support that we offered. So, for example, we commissioned a literature review on counter-radicalization, and there was a big meeting in Brussels, then another one, a regional one for heads of delegations, and then the experts were deployed to all the delegations in the region to help them brainstorm how they can better address those topics by, in the field, by specific programs that they are funding. So it is not, it doesn't generate one size-fits-all response, quite the opposite. During the discussions, it's possible to identify how we can offer additional support or where more in-depth discussion can benefit the colleagues in being more effective in designing responses. But as I said, those conversations that are taking place during the consultations are in themselves already changing because I think otherwise they don't happen. It's very rarely that in a busy administration, colleagues working on one country from different ministries have time to come together and have a half-a-day discussion about everything that they do and see the links, and particularly have those discussions with a conflict lens or sort of risk of violence lens in mind. So hopefully that is also a culture-changing exercise in itself. But we will see. What I didn't mention is that we will repeat this global risk scan every 6 months. So every 6 months we will go to member states, and every 6 months we will identify countries where there'll be more in-depth discussion, and every 6 months we will go back to member states for an exchange and a conversation about what is it that we're jointly doing to try to address the warring trends in those countries in order to be better at changing those dynamics.
Okay, thank you so much. The time is running, so I think we have to close down now. Let me take this opportunity again to thank you so much for coming here. I think we could have gone on for quite some time. We could have discussed the geographic scope, the intensity, and you presented something about kind of the niches that the EU take. I think that all of us should be very happy that the EU is strengthening. First, to see a kind of commitment to contributing to peace and stability outside of the European continent, take on this global role. I think that's extremely important. And also that you supplement the kind of activity that we have done for quite some time in terms of trade and development aid, etc., but also supplement it with this stronger emphasis on peace and mediation. And I also think that it's really inspiring to hear about how you link civil society, researchers, experts, and to try to develop a kind of knowledge foundation for your policy, and how to also this knowledge basis is then meant to drive you forward to this policy. I think it's very encouraging, particularly for us as researchers that have some kind of idea that knowledge and systematic assessments is adding something to the peace making efforts. So thank you so much for this. I would just like to say that, as you know, some of our researchers are preparing an EU application on exactly peace building. So that we look forward to hoping that could come together. And also I would say that for researchers and also for the EU, I think it would be extremely beneficial if you opened up your early warning system some way or the other, made it transparent, because that would kind of provide really an important role to the world as well, how the EU see global developments, signal something about things, and that could also help a lot of other people to draw their attention to some of these things. I know there might be difficulties in doing this because there are other competing interests, but at the same time, I think that in a world of transparency and openness, since you collect this information, that could be really helpful. That's at least how scientists and researchers think about the world. So just on that note, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Excellent.
Very good.